Excellent. Hello, my name is Gabriel Rothblatt, Swami G of the Terasem Movement Transreligion, and I am here today to perform the inspirant interview with Khannea. And I'm going to turn it over now to Khannea to introduce themselves and a little bit about their story.
Hi, my name is Khannea. For historical reasons, Sunsil. My last name is Derven. I wandered into the community, the transhumanist community, through Second Life around 2006-07. That was a very dynamic, maybe chaotic time for me. Collaborated with Julia Prisco and Felipe van Nedervelde in building a Second Life. Then Felipe recruited me for building in Second Life for Terasem. I found myself pleasantly surprised, is that most of the ideological background of Terasem and the original founders of Terasem was seamlessly parallel with mine. And although I have philosophically a problem with cryonics and certain aspects of cryonics, I cling very much to sequentiality and persistence of consciousness in stuff. So my perfect plan would to not be dead at any stage or in a dead-ish stage. For me, a good night's sleep is enough. But other than that, I find myself very parallel to specific founders of life experience of the founders of Terasem. So to illustrate that parallel, I transitioned myself in the Netherlands in between 2014. I consider myself fully transitioned, as in she and her and that kind of stuff. I inhabit a far left spectrum politically, and I try to synthesize libertarian values with leftist values, which is unheard of in America, I understand. I wandered a lot, partied a lot, knew extremes of romance and heartbreak, which is a life experience growing thing. I tried many things, but transition, it takes you away from theoretical content. Second Life died on the vine. I had no follow-up, although I tried a whole bunch of stuff here with people like Arjen Kamphuis, Quela Hermans, and my dear friend Amanda Stoel, which she spoke in Terasem and Second Life. But yeah, I've been on hiatus, so to speak, in the far wilderness, and I now would greatly look forward to return to the fold in Terasem, since I still share those values, and I am troubled by the continued corporatization and capitalization of transhumanism and associated ideologies. It's becoming a Silicon Valley, somewhat cynical thing, and I'm not overjoyed with that. Singularity universities become sort of a think tank, and they made clear that I have no place with my ideology. So I would love to return to a meaningful contribution to the movement in its wider forms. I maintain very good friendships with a bunch of people like Julia Prisco and others. And I've tried to look at various options but I think my best option is Terasem. I think the only ideologically compatible option is Terasem, and to a lesser degree, the Institute of Ethics and Emerging Technologies with James Hughes. I consider myself good friends with Orbiter Gray.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for kind of that introduction to Khannea. And one thing that I want to pick up on in your story is how really your involvement in Second Life was your introduction and your kind of like catalyst into the transhumanist space. And so I want to kind of maybe learn a little bit more about that, and particularly, I guess the thought that I'm having is, was it simply, kind of being in this virtual space that kind of opened your mind to like this like other sense of self, or was it just content in Second Life that maybe you were exposed to?
Well, Second Life allowed a lot of people with particular view on gender issues and sexual issues to experiment. And at the time, it was sort of hip and trendy. People had great expectations of it in 2006 till 2009. It became squalorous and disgraceful quickly after that, so I abandoned it. I haven't been there in years, or barely. It's no longer my thing. But at the time, Julio Prisco, I think Ben Goertzel, Felipe van Nedervelde, Exokia da Silva, who we all suspect being a famous English evolutionary biologist. I think I gave it away there. We all
was it Dawkins? Was that right?
Yeah, I think that South Park made a nice joke about that. But yeah, there's this very strong suspicion that, and a bunch of other names. But I think that Second Life was happening and was the new frontier, because we all expected some kind of virtual reality to just magically emerge from the internet. But Second Life wasn't that. The corporations didn't like the flying penises, so to speak. So yeah, but I could build there, and I was actually, my strongest memories are not about the sordid stuff, but mostly about the building, the freedom to create structures. Right now I'm reading a book of Stevenson, Neil Stephenson. It's Fall, and it covers a guy who was cryonically frozen and then finds himself, or the mental construct, a destructively uploaded mental construct, finds himself as the first person in a sort of unpleasant, constrictive environment, and he literally creates everything from scratch, up to bees and trees and everything. And then other people join, and I haven't finished the book, but it's a really good read. And I think it's very parallel to the things like Vanilla Sky and Terasem and Mind Files, etc. Yeah, I think they even make jokes about it in the book.
Yeah,
they call them utopians.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. Particularly that aspect. So for me, interestingly, I, at this point in time, I excuse me, I did not spend much time in Second Life, because I felt, honestly, it was accessibility. Even for me at that point in time, I had been pretty, I involved with computers and, savvy or whatnot, but Second Life required sound and video processing, which was higher than really, most people were utilizing.
Yeah.
And it's not, I had a computer, but it wasn't strong or powerful enough to kind of run and exist that. So I never spent much time, in Second Life. Although I did spend certainly a lot of time, in video games and other, things, but often I think a little bit more in the console world than in the PC, virtual space. And I, it's an interesting thing, but I think also there's this accessibility thing. So even still now, I keep coming back to Zoom. I also I work for a real estate brokerage that is a virtual, virtual reality program, but it continually, I see people defaulting to Zoom because of this base accessibility.
Yes, I understand that.
Right. Yeah. And so I think particularly, having somewhat of kind of a libertarian, also this leftist theology, how do you reflect on the accessibility issue around kind of technology and when we might not only just reach a processing point, but actually that accessibility point where, now everybody can get on Zoom. You can call in, you can, right. Everybody can connect there. When might we, or how might we see a better accessibility of VR and AR?
Well, I see the beginnings of that process clearly ahead of us. I've discussed this with a bunch of people, but say the moment we have a universal library of assets we can use. For instance, if you open a game like Crysis and you open the game editor of Crysis, and now Unreal is way better, but I worked with Crysis for a while, a Crysis engine, CryEngine, you have the assets in discrete folders and you can drag them in world. So you see little soldier, and it was like a sort of Korean context soldiers. You grab the soldier and you drop them in world and you see the soldier appear, and immediately that soldier would be animated as a working human being. And realistically, photorealistically, even like many years ago, the moment we have that package, that discrete package of animations and the physique, the body, the sound, the animations, the standing, etc., the interactivity. Once you have that, you can do something very important, and that is to destroy liminality. Right now, those games like virtual reality, Second Life, are horribly luminous, and that creates a sort of a traumatic feeling in the subject. The mind recoils from all that emptiness. Where you have beautiful buildings and columns, etc., it's an empty paradise. The moment you can animate, maybe you've seen the last proof of concept videos, Unreal for Matrix, where you have a city and you just do the same thing. You deposit assets, cars, interactive cars, etc., in world. I wouldn't say you would end up something like Ready Player One, because that's like a fantasy. But I can imagine that if you create meaningful worlds with manageable distractions and chaos and hacking and exploits and stuff like that, that's not too corporate, because people also have a considerable allergy against the corporate influence, the Facebookization of everything. If you create something like that, you would find that you hit a saturation point, and I think that Zoom would be gone very quickly. But yeah, hardware is a problem, major problem, because people still run, there's some people running Windows 98, and that would not work. And I think that we are getting at a point that I think a few years from now, that suddenly we go to different quantum state. I'm extremely optimistic about the new headset from Apple. I personally don't subscribe to the business model, the ecology of Apple. I don't buy Apple, but their headset is very promising. And the moment you have AI-ish, because AI is used for everything as a term, but AI-ish driven pattern recognition, where you can type in the air, seeing a keyboard projected under your hands, or interface of some sort, where you can rearrange the skin of the keyboard and rearrange the in Rorschach or some other format, where you have as a user freedom, playful freedom over your own space, while not imposing on the space of other people with flying penises, so to speak. Then you have, I think, a business model. I think maybe the novel Rainbow's End was a few years ahead, but I think by 2030 this is an established industry, and it's going to allow a lot of people that are currently becoming unemployed to find a job there.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for that. I want to move a little bit and talk about your religious background and kind of thoughts on theology
Yes.
before we move in and kind of talk about your thoughts on cryonics and
Yes.
your stance on there. So were you raised in a religious family? Do you have other religious affiliations? What are your thoughts on God?
I am vehemently. I grew up in a very unpleasant youth. My father was, let me be realistic here, a well-known gangster in the environment of The Hague. He was a criminal, and he was a plague and a terror to everyone around him. I was placed in a protective environment, which was nominally Catholic, and having no very strong relationship with the concept of a father figure, I rebelled against everything instinctively. One might argue to the point of pathology at some point. I led an escapist life from early age, not having to deal with that, not having to deal with certain gender questions in my core personality, which was very evident even before I was 6. My desires, my fantasies, my urges were very strong in that regard. I was exploring, but rejecting also. I rejected quickly, then I explored. I had a look at Wicca. I just left and I moved on. I had a look at Scientology and I laughed even harder. I moved on. I befriended some people from the classical FA Satanism scene here in Amsterdam, but it was mostly slapstick jokes, not any spiritual context. There was a minor spiritual ritual context, but I'd never bought into that very deeply. One of my best friends is still nominally the high priest there. But I think, only thing they do is like he has kids now, so it's dormant. Yeah, I sought, and I never found anything that pleased me. And when I studied philosophy in the early 1990s, I started realizing that what you cannot find out there in the world, you might be able to reverse engineer in some meaningful format. And that's my basic assumption, is that right now we are in a conquest to escape the constraint-based universe and the constraint-based world and reverse any spiritual aspects in the forms of servitor AIs or accommodating heavenly realms or whatever. I greatly mesh with the ideology with David Pearce and paradise building, and what will happen within our intercerebrum in terms of motivational enhancement, intelligence enhancement, interfaces, neural links of some sort, would also happen around us in terms of a world that is infinitely more accommodating and liberating than what we have right now. That is my goal, and I seamlessly connected with that belief and view with my dear departed friend Arjen Kamphuis. We had a lot of ideas secretly in common, and we joked around it. He was an amazing guy. He passed away a couple of years ago, and yeah, I never found a home in that regard in my spiritual sense. I have no consciousness of a patriarchal male god. If I have a sort of jocular consciousness or awareness or a warm spot in my heart, it is sort of more Erzuli and Lilith. And that's the women that never said yes to apples. No original sin. No original sin in my universe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for, kind of sharing that, your background and your thoughts on that. And, it's very common, for people who come to Terasem to have looked all over, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I like what you said in there that I really like, because I think it's just so true of Terasem, is this: if you really want to know, you need to kind of reverse engineer, how it works, right? And so on the one hand, I think Terasem does that to all these religious frameworks that have around all the diversity of religious thought and ideology. Terasem tries to unite under this kind of philosophy. But also I where I see tie into this reverse engineering theme is when we get into this process of like mind filing and looking at like, turn Siri on. Looking at this, sorry, lost my train of thought there. What did I say?
Reverse engineering mind files.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, the reverse engineering. Yeah, right. So with the mind files, that we are the process of looking at who am I, right?
Yeah.
And then what that forces you to do, like, well, what is the I, And how do I start to chart that? And it begins to look at some points, and then am I any one of these points, or is it this kind of line? Am I the trajectory, not any single point on this path? And but I think it's more than a mirror, more than a journal, more than a scrapbook. Like, this process of creating a mind file asks the deepest questions of yourself, and you really have to
Yes.
break down not only what is this concept of self or consciousness, but how does that apply to me, my life, and not only where I've been, but where I want to go, what I want to become. And I think that we get more aspirational than we could ever be without the ability to break down all this. And I think, to a degree, there's also a therapeutic, even counseling aspect of being able to get some of these ideas out of yourself, and legit, if you're going to live for 500 years, you really are going to need external storage, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or else your mind will just be overloaded with this amount of processing. So I guess I want to kind of use that kind of tangent to
Or even debugging.
go and right, yeah. And so let's maybe pivot from that and talk about how do you approach your own process of mind filing? What tools do you like? What ones do you not? What have you done maybe kind of in a progression of defining and backing up your sense of self?
I cling a lot. There's a discussion about the ship of Theseus and who you are at a particular moment, and since I am thoroughly physical and thoroughly hedonic and enmeshed in my experience, and I cannot disentangle myself. There is often a discussion where you say you're going to be uploaded is an objective on certain conceptual elements. That upload is not you. Yeah, I would retort, if I say it's me, it's me. Interestingly, I'm making a documentary. A documentary maker is making a documentary about me, which is going to be an international documentary. The documentary maker is Brian Den Hartog. They've been filming it since 2018, and the documentary is in a very large part about this question. And I try to immediately lateralize every aspect of this. So they say, how do you see yourself in a century from now, after you're uploaded, etc.? And I says, well, I'm no longer me. I see myself ideally as several dozen branching versions of me, whereby I immediately deconstruct the concept of an ego and I. Some of these versions might be argumentative or at odds, but I hope to have parties every now and then, and all my sisters and me, which is me is all my sisters at that time, because they all share this particular set of memories, maybe edited a little, but and then we gather and we would have wonderful reunion parties, I would say. But having said that, there is something to be said for the idea that if the chain of consciousness is severed, we sever the chain of consciousness every night when we go to bed, but structurally severed, I have a feeling that death for me is a horrible thing. And just the thought of it makes me recoil. And the thought of it, like in that novel I mentioned from Neil Stephenson, The Fall, that this person is dead for years. Then the mind is catastrophically uploaded or scanned. And that scan is somehow integrated into a AI. There is a catastrophic break of continuity there. And I would find that infinitely sad from my perspective. I am sort of like a standing wave in the water or a flame. And if that flame or standing wave is extinguished and reconstructed, it would feel as an atrocity for me. in the current reflective, forward-looking sense of self. But so I haven't gotten around, for that very specific reason, to do much with my mind file. I did a bunch of things, uploaded it, but I don't think the website recorded it for some reason. I tried to do something with it, but it didn't pan out. Fortunately, I think that we're very close to the era where AI can meaningfully reconstruct versions of me, which already is happening in Facebook, arguably. Facebook has a shadow profile of me, and I'm pretty sure that Facebook can have, Facebook employees can have quite meaningful dialogues of literally AI dialogues with these mind files of me, where I have no consciousness of that happening. 10 years from now, this is super sophisticated level, like the movie Her. Or She, I don't know.
Oh yeah. And, that and the one with Bruce Willis where the surrogates.
Yeah, but that is a person. That is a direct linkage.
Yeah.
But what if you have a simulation of me, a la Blade Runner-ish, and Mossad or certain alphabet agencies consult that simulation? What would Khannea do right now? Well, she would probably be doing this and this and this. I think that this is going to happen in China to great detriment of their civilization and their culture. Bad people will make use of this, and that's maybe not the main reason why I'm a little apprehensive, but I'm just sad about not not being there, the delusion or the illusion of perpetuity being broken. Yeah, I find it horrible.
Yeah. I think many people do. I struggle with these concepts as well. You know, and it took me a long time. I recently actually got a cryonics membership with Alcor, but it took me quite a long time to come to that, you know, place.
How much
I think
it's
expensive. It's it's expensive, and it's also ongoing. So you need $250,000 or more in life insurance for the plan that you sign over to Alcor, but then you also have to pay Alcor membership fees. So
completely off the table for me. Not even a tenth of that would be on the table.
Right, and so again, this huge accessibility issue. I still struggle with that, and I have emerging belief that I'd like to see cryonics considered life support, not death. And so when someone is terminally ill, being put onto cryonics isn't something that you have to wait for them to die for, that anyone who is essentially terminally ill can electively, you know, be put into cryonics, and it's treated like life support, not like death.
I had a lot of those discussions with one Eugen Lytle. I consider him a very, very, very dear friend. And as you may know, he worked the development of the current process with Mike Dawkins. And he had a presentation about this topic and the horrible things that happened, like partially thawed remains. The early days of Alcor, or I don't know which company it was at the time, but the early days of cryonics were quite horrific. And I can't recall, maybe I don't want to recall all the details I heard from that presentation and what I discussed with him. He was skeptical, but he is right now in Germany researching a process, but he made clear that if I were to have a contract with Alcor, my chances of vitrification would be in Europe close to or effectively zero. They would end up with a bucket of mush before I end up in America. Also, my current laws would not allow me the process of me being exported to America. So there would be months of delays before my frozen remains. The frozen remains would not be frozen in any meaningful manner. You probably would be able to get a clone from that 50 years from now, but mind file is out of question. So I am very cynical in that regard. Even if Alcor works, I think that I can summarize safely that Eugen has made clear there's no chance in hell that there is a connectome to be retrieved from frozen remains. Zero. Yeah. So I don't want to dispel any faith in this, but my authority tells me that the current technologies are not cutting it.
Yeah, I tend to lean in that way as well. Um, I hope that it's ultimately never necessary, because
Yeah.
I also believe in the continuity. I mean, I favor the continuity. I don't know any, I can't say one is right or not, but I
Yeah.
certainly tend to favor the continuity of consciousness direction, myself. Um, yeah, good. So I think so. We've talked a lot about. I think a lot of the things we got that you first were aware of Terasem through your work with Second Life, and through Julio and Philippe, who were very involved there. Julio still,
Yeah.
he's I
Yeah.
mean, so much amazing content.
Yeah.
And he has been leading the colloquia that we have recently restarted, and I'm working with him to relaunch the Terasem journals right now. So much going on, but that's how you're for early kind of introduction here. You participated in Terasem gatherings in Second Life in the past, so that's one of the other things that we asked. How have you participated before? We've talked about kind of your mind file, thoughts and progression, what what you've been doing with that, and a little bit about yourself, your background with exploring kind of religious organization, and how Terasem, has really come to kind of, fit this place that you are looking for. And I think that is because at a dogmatic level, we've deconstructed religious thought and theology,
Yes.
and combined it and graft it with scientific process, right? And
Yes.
so religious thought, scientific process, so you can believe but not become delusional, as I like to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and you've been very involved throughout all these concepts and topics that and I think what's really important, I like to see, and is that you have criticism that you are a transhumanist, but you're not necessarily a cryonicist. That we
I
don't
would
all
be.
we
If I
yeah
could, I would be.
yeah
I might literally freeze myself tomorrow if I knew that this technology worked. I
yeah.
probably consider freezing myself in the next few years prematurely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so this is. I mean, I don't want to get too much into it here, but I would like to. Um, I have thought a lot about how people can electively enter, or could, kind of do these things, and I think that uh, law in the Netherlands is complementary, and um, I think that there is a path to using flagged ships, kind of like Women on Waves did with abortions.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
there is a path to potentially do this with cryonics.
Yeah. No,
On
if
Yeah,
you had
yeah,
funding, you could start a company here. But what I've noticed is that the cemetery burial industry in America, particularly, but also in the Netherlands, is extremely hostile to
yes,
cryonics. Yeah.
yes, yeah. It's actually there's a couple states who are they are trying to legalize um, human composting, and
Yeah.
it's actually crazy that, like, actually it's illegal to do to anything but cremate or embalm a body in most
Yeah.
US states. It's actually illegal to do anything else with the body. You can't compost it, you can't it's actually illegal to do that stuff, which is like,
Yeah.
why would it, like, who would care? Like, but like, yes,
Human bodies are toxic.
right,
Yeah.
right, they went through the process to actually make it illegal, to do anything but embalm the body,
Yeah.
largely.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty wild. So I'm going to, since we wrapped up, I think our core questions, I'm going to share my screen to present the uh, um, the pledge, and then ask you to recite that. If I can bring back up, where am I? All right. Yeah. Yeah. Let me know if you are seeing um, the pledge on
Yes,
your screen. Yep.
yes,
All right. Now, if you could recite that um, for for us.
yes. Without any reservation, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the collective consciousness of Terasem and to its principles for which it stands, education persistently with diversity, unity, and joyful immortality everywhere.
Wonderful. Thank you. And just going to share our Terasem flag and the Terasem greeting with you, which I know you're familiar because you know you're not new to Terasem. We're just now getting to doing this video together.
Yes,
Um, but yeah, the Terasem greeting, which is if we were in person to touch foreheads, and then you can repeat after me. I am you.
I am you,
You am I.
you am I,
We are one.
we are one.
And excellent. So that officiates, our process for participating and being an inspirant of Terasem. I really want to thank you, Khannea, for your long history of engagement and interest with Terasem. And looking forward to kind of working with you more and seeing you at gatherings and functions, and advancing this collective consciousness, and all the beautiful and diverse permutations of life and intelligence that this is moving us closer towards. Any final
Uh,
thoughts?
yeah, I was just one question. In 2010, we constructed a model for an O'Neill habitat. And the horrible story is that it melted or something in part. Um,
Oh, yes. Actually, so yeah, so great. So before we end, it is still here. It is
ah,
not in the best condition because let me turn off my background
yeah,
because you'll see, we're here in Florida,
yeah.
um, and the Florida ashram
Your
has
your
a
PDF still
lot
on.
of sun. Oh, the PDF. Oh, I didn't stop sharing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there we go. The yeah, so we get very heavy sun exposure in
Yeah.
this all glass ashram here. Um,
Oh,
so as you
um,
can see, yeah, very very
our
lovely.
baby.
Um,
Yeah, I built a neighbor's house.
and here it is.
Oh, it's sort of still there.
It's sort of
Yeah,
the, but yeah, you can see this piece. Um,
yeah.
if you can see in here, the kind of the
Yeah.
sun really got to it. I think the electronics kind of have come apart, but it is still here.
Wow. Wow.
It is, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
As you may know,
still.
the maker, the maker which I collaborated making it, Simon Deering. He was a well-known Aikido fifth dan,
Oh
and
wow,
he
yep.
worked on the movie Alien. He was a character. But sadly, he was already diagnosed, I think, and he died a year later. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Too bad. Well, it is still here. We cherish it, but over 10 plus years exposed to the sun here, it is slowly kind of melted in that sun. We only recently put up this sunshade that I think you can see out here.
Yeah, I
There's
see.
a sunshade over that patio. That's actually very new. And before that sunshade was put in, it could get unbearably
I,
hot with
I,
the.
someone told me literally stalactites of glue were emerging from it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, good.
yeah. Yeah.
My heart
Um,
breaks.
well, yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and look forward to maybe a new version of it. And I'm actually, one thing I do, I participate with the International Space Development Conference with the National Space Society, and they have teams of international teams of children who come together and compete, and they build similar, not quite as detailed, but similar models of anneal cylinders. So it's beautiful to see. And I think it'd be great to maybe get that either refreshed or do a new little model of it.
Yeah, the standard of the science and insights. I follow a lot of the content of Isaac Arthur. You must know him.
Oh,
And
yes. Yep.
yeah, and I follow him from like his early videos, and I think it's the best source. I think they elected him to some kind of function recently.
He is now the president of the National Space Society. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, he's the guy. He's super good, but he's his new insights is like the cylinders would be covered up, so there would be industrial stuff, and the cylinder would rotate inside that, and that's a nice image. I think that most cylinders will be built inside asteroids, literally as centrifuges.
Awesome. That's so good. Excellent. Well, I'm going to end the recording now.
Yes.